And I'm like, oh, I actually like going to church now. And so I think we need to use the same concept when it comes to cybersecurity. You're
Catherine, we are live now.
oh yeah, I'm staying away from that. But if you make it
actually, we can hear some feedback on the other
bring it
session.
home to people, I think you'll bring more people to.
Is it better now, Catherine?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay.
Do you want me to kick this off?
Yes, the floor is yours now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And welcome everyone to the Canada Hour. I'm quite excited about this. This is the first time that Canada has actually hosted an hour, and we chose the topic of innovation and the importance of innovation, not only in Canada but globally, to give some folks in the audience some context. And we've got a pretty aggressive agenda, so I'm not going to chat very long, but I want to give you kind of an overview of what the Canadian innovation landscape looks like right now. In 2017, the federal government of Canada announced a $1.26 billion program called Innovation and Skills Plan. It was administered by Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. As part of that program, it was all designed clearly to accelerate Canada to the global stage in terms of innovation excellence, skilled labor, and the acceleration of job creation and business acceleration. Since then, the government has put in, of that $1.26 billion, has invested roughly, or committed roughly $918 million for the Innovation Supercluster Program. Those superclusters were announced in August of 2018, and there's 5 of them right now. The government also committed an additional $80 million to standing up the National Cybersecurity Consortium, which brings together academia and industry across Canada, with the clear goal of accelerating intellectual property within academia, helping commercialize it with the assistance of the public sector, and also to accelerate and train the labor force as it relates to cybersecurity, which is, again, the skills gap is an issue not only within Canada, but globally. Let's layer into some of the realities of where we are right now, because we've seen some great things in terms of the investment by MasterCard, which was announced at the beginning of this year, where they're investing $550 million, of which the federal government is contributing $49 million of that to build out a global intelligence and cybersecurity innovation center in Vancouver. Current state of that ICED Superclusters program that I've mentioned, the Parliamentary Budget Officer released a report last week on this program. About 3%, which equates to about $30 million, has been invested so far. The target, based on the original timelines, was $104 million. Recently, adding to that has been the 2020 Bloomberg Innovation Index, where we've seen Canada slipped down to 22nd place, now behind Slovenia. So while we have a lot of really good things happening, there's a consensus among the innovation industry that good isn't good enough, that we have the potential and all of the tools that are needed to be great. The panel that I've assembled here is a coast-to-coast leadership panel. These are folks that I have had the opportunity to meet, to work with, and hold in very high regard. And I think they're a wonderful interpretation of what exactly is at stake for Canada and what we were looking to achieve. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Alex Minea, who I've had the pleasure over the past of being able to actually be on panels with, and I always learn from. So Alex, if you want to kick it off for everyone.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name's Alex. I look after security and privacy at Georgian. So we're actually an investment fund based out of Toronto, Canada, and we invest in growth stage companies across all of North America. And we specifically focus on companies that align with what we call our investment thesis areas, which are really focused around artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. And so I run the cybersecurity side of our investing. So I not only act as the interim internal CISO, but I also work with the CISOs across our different portfolio companies. Within our portfolio, we've got about 45 different companies, including 8 cybersecurity companies. And my background's actually in cybersecurity, so I've been doing it for about 15 years. Before I joined Georgian, I was actually at BlackBerry for 12 years, and so I helped to build up their cybersecurity division as well. And so thank you very much, Catherine, for having me on the panel. Hopefully what I can bring here is a bit of a mixed Canadian and also international flavor, because of the fact that even though I've been living in Canada and been in the cybersecurity sector for most of my adult life, I've also had the opportunity to travel the world and to work with cybersecurity companies around the world. So I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of the overall kind of global market, and hopefully I can add some value to this conversation.
So, Alex, on that note, because obviously you've, with your role with BlackBerry and now with Georgian, you've had the opportunity, as you mentioned, to work with a lot of companies and innovation firms, both within Canada and outside of Canada. What's our value proposition? How do you think we're doing right now?
So I honestly think when it comes to cybersecurity, Canada is one of the most innovative countries out there. And the way I think about it is there's actually different pockets of innovation across different parts of Canada. So if you look at security specifically, and especially when it comes to things like mobile security and quantum security, we look at Kitchener-Waterloo region as being one of the leaders there. And obviously a lot of that comes from BlackBerry, but also from companies like Raytheon, and also from a lot of the quantum computing universities there. So things like the University of Waterloo, the Institute for Quantum Computing, the Perimeter Institute. We're seeing a lot of quantum innovation coming out of the Kitchener-Waterloo region, to the point where I've even heard it referred to as the Quantum Valley, just because of the depth of quantum innovation happening there. In Toronto, what we're seeing right now is a lot of innovation around artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the way that that's being applied to cybersecurity. We see a lot of innovation coming out of the Ottawa region as well, around things like cyber insurance, around things like automotive, for instance. We have a lot of companies out of Montreal, a lot of companies out of Vancouver. So I think one of the challenges for Canada right now is kind of creating that national identity around innovation and around cybersecurity. And that's something I'm definitely looking forward to discussing today.
That's fantastic, Alex. So I'm going to move on to Valerie, because Valerie, you're kind of wearing 2 hats in this discussion, not only as a cybersecurity specialist and some of the work that you've done in that area, but you're also an entrepreneur. So what's your impression in terms of as not only a user of technology, but now actually a entrepreneur with a new piece of technology?
Well, it's really interesting. I think to give you some context, I started my career at Nortel. So I started in IT security before it was called cyber. So that was a little while ago. And I think what I've seen happen, it's interesting because obviously I made this my profession. I've worked in Canadian and US government, specifically relating to national security and intelligence. I have a master's that focused on cyber as a tool for terrorist groups in particular, and also a master's in sociology and trying to understand people and grouping, why people do what they do, whether it's at the negative or the positive. So, why people group in adversarial means and use cyber as a tool to move their agenda forward, and why things like social media are so meaningful to groups of people. So I tried to focus on cyber in particular from a number of different areas. And then in the background, I was kind of solving my own business problem or my own government problem, where I saw we had some gaps in threat risk assessment. So this being a cornerstone to some of the work that I do, I started working on a software solution and an algorithm that I moved forward through the patent process. And we're currently now commercializing it. So I guess you're right. I've seen a couple different, areas of this. And I kind of find it funny when you say, as an entrepreneur, because I think one thing Canada has done in recent years is we're starting to make a distinction between innovators and entrepreneurs, and recognizing that not all entrepreneurs are innovators and not all innovators are entrepreneurs. I would arguably fall into that latter group, where I am probably an innovator, not particularly an entrepreneur. So a lot of the processes that I saw from an innovator side that were meant to facilitate and move innovative technologies forward to the private and public sector was frustrating for me because it wasn't part of my nature. So me being a chief scientist, I'm very good with policy. I'm very good with anything that's black and white and analog. But when it comes to embarking on partnerships and funding and networking and creating those networks or ecosystems that you really do rely on as an entrepreneur or an innovator to move your product forward can be very difficult for a lot of individuals. So I think in Canada, we are a nation of innovators, definitely. I love looking back decades upon decades, back when we were an agrarian society, and we look at the innovation that we've gone through and the Industrial Revolution that we experienced here in North America, certainly in Canada, how we took these very simple, basic needs and moved them into innovative processes that build massive markets. So we know how to do it. We have been doing it. I think a lot of the frameworks that we see in place currently with here, particularly in Canada, we're starting to see more and more, and maybe it's just a maturation that we're starting to experience, but we're really starting to see that commercial access and ability to generate and use knowledge. And we're developing measures to foster these larger and expanding markets. And it goes beyond having, I guess, like a pro-innovation framework that relates to the tax system or intellectual property, or how we view technology and that innovation is not a threat to our job markets or our workforces. It's really a culmination of things. And I think we've been touching on a lot of this in Canada, and we're seeing it materialize. And I think it's just a matter of time that this really grows for us, because I think we have all of the right ingredients in that recipe to developing a really forward-thinking culture of innovation.
That's fantastic. And I know when we get into kind of the second part of the discussion, one of the things that maybe you can share with the audience is kind of some of the experiences you've had as a startup and some of the challenges and opportunities that come from that, but give folks an opportunity to kind of better understand that. So Jamie, you're very interesting because you're approaching the innovation from the human side, the people side. So perhaps you can tell the audience a little bit about Cyber Island Global and about what you're seeing, you and the team.
Yeah, sure thing. So about 2 years ago, I left my cushy executive role to go on the entrepreneur startup phase and say, instead of seeing money coming in, watching $50,000 a month go away for a period of time and all that kind of stuff, right? So we've been on that journey for a little over a year now and enjoying a fair amount of success. And what our focus is really around a very specific area of cyber called identity and access management. And we're solving or bridging the gap kind of the talent issue that's there, right? So the talent issue is everywhere, but it's specifically in this area that we're focusing on. And we kind of take care of that in three ways. One is, the same as everybody else. We have talented recruiters that beg, borrow, and steal from each other and go through that process. And that is completely unsustainable, right? Like we just can't, we have to just stop stealing from each other. We have to start kind of finding ways to work together or build out that market a little bit. From a North American perspective, immigration in Canada is incredibly attractive, right? Immigrating to here is attractive, but also the processes are relatively easy compared to other countries that mostly are shut down, right? I just saw an announcement today that H-1B is on its final deathbed, kind of idea, with the depending on what happens next week, with the U.S. election, and I think we have a real opportunity at having people come in and live their North American dream here in Canada, and the area that we're from, we're in Atlantic Canada, traditionally an agrarian tourism-based society, right? So there's been a lot of kind of aggressive programs to help support us bring in folks even faster. So we have, several people coming from India next month, that are going to have an opportunity to come and live here with us and work in the North American market. So that's all good news from there. But I think, again, globally, again, not sustainable, because now we're just borrowing and stealing from other countries and bringing them to Canada, right? And I think, it's good for us, but not good for the industry in general. So the other piece that we're doing is this digital identity fast track program with the universities, and highly subsidized through government, highly subsidized, from a human capital perspective from our 18 kind of universities within a 3-hour drive of us. So they, just have a lot of really smart people that we're going to help fast track into these processes. And so we're kind of taking care of it in those 3 ways, specifically around identity and access management. We have some other capabilities, but that's our primary focus, is in that area. And I would say from the appetite for investment by government to be involved with growth pitchers like ours, it really does exist, right? There's a lot of kind of these partnerships that you can develop. And what I appreciate about them is that they want to be there to support you, but they have no desire to be controlling, right? So, there's an element of commitment that we have to come back to them and have a conversation about how we're doing and where we're at, because they have a responsibility, because it's taxpayers' money, right, that are supporting these projects. But at the end of the day, there is no lack of those opportunities. We almost have to have a full-time person sitting just going through all the how do we connect to all these government programs, because there's just so many opportunities that are there. So I think we've enjoyed that here. It might be because the Atlantic, Canadian provinces are traditionally economically depressed, right? So we probably have a few opportunities that might not be the same in some of the larger centers, but that's been our journey, and we have no lack of opportunity. It's a really neat business that we have going on here.
So, and as I said, when we get in kind of the open, we'll call it the scrum, which Alex Manet is going to kind of lead, we'll have that discussion around, development of talent, access to talent. Canada's doing, from our Prime Minister down, some pretty aggressive marketing around what the value proposition of coming to work in Canada if you're a skilled professional. So, Dr. Lemieux, you kind of have 2 hats again in this discussion too, both as, a professor and somebody who's kind of developing the next generation of skilled professional, but you're also leading a project in blockchain that maybe perhaps you can share with the audience. I think you might be on mute.
There we go.
There you go.
That's better. So yeah, a little bit of context around my background. I trained as an archivist, and my first degrees were in archival studies. And so it really is a path of progression from looking at traditional forms of record keeping, which were paper-based, and some of the problems around authenticating information that led me into a career, and developing issues around privacy in particular that led me into a career in cybersecurity. And so it's with this spirit of, you don't spring full blown from the head of Zeus when you're born, you are a work in progress. And so I believe in human development, and that's why I guess I'm a professor. And I started in 2017 to be, 2016 to be really curious about blockchain. And I just, I basically knew nothing about it. And I said, well, I'm curious about this. I want to learn about it. But I saw all around me young minds that were curious about it as well, really inspired by, some of the ideological propositions around Bitcoin. And there had been at the University of British Columbia, where I'm based, in the School of Information, this Bitcoin club that had started up. So I brought these young students together, and I said, well, let's learn about this technology. There was no program at the time at UBC. It was a completely informal exercise sprung from curiosity. And I think that's one thing that I really want to emphasize. We have young, creative minds in Canada, and they're eager to learn, and they're like sponges. And so it just takes someone, in my case, I saw a role here for myself. Jamie's been talking about this, someone to harness that curiosity and energy. And we have the openness to do that. These students came from all over the world, by the way. Some were from Iran, some were from the UAE, some from China, of course, Canadian students that were born and raised in Canada as well, but very diverse backgrounds. And we just came together out of curiosity, and we worked with our industry partners as well. So there were groups within Vancouver Lower Mainland that were experimenting with this technology, and we said, hey, come and learn with us. Come and share with us what you know, and we'll share with you what we know, and together we'll all level up. And that's how Blockchain at UBC, which is a research and education cluster at the University of British Columbia, which I founded, that's how it really got started. And last year, we received through NSERC Create, which is a federal government program, funding to start a blockchain graduate pathway, which augments existing degrees. So we're very multidisciplinary. We have computer science, PhDs and master students, engineering, PhDs and master students, business administration, graduate students, archival science, library and information science, public health, public administration. Students from there, we have about 38 students now. We're going into our second year. So the cohort is growing from all of these disciplines, and they're coming together and they're learning about blockchain, the various, not just the big public permissionless, Bitcoin, Ethereum, but also some of the private permissioned type blockchain solutions that are associated with identity management. That's really where I've been working. I've been working on solutions for in the healthcare sector. How do we ensure that we can share our health information, which is critical for advancing healthcare? And of course, we understand that more and more in our COVID times, how we need to analyze health data to understand this disease and understand the risk factors. How do we do that, but give people the assurance that their data is going to be protected, it's going to be secure, and their privacy is going to be respected? So I've been working on technologies using blockchain, in particular the Hyperledger Indy Aries protocol, that is really about having our cake and eating it too, making sure that we can share data when we need it, but also protect it and respect individuals' privacy. So students are exposed, they work on these projects. So I've actually had about 6 of the students in our program working as interns with the company, or the company that we're working with, Molecular U, to develop this technology. And so it's a very industry-focused training program, but it's also research-oriented. So they're all studying for their masters and PhDs, and incorporating the knowledge and experience that they're getting in these real projects into advancing theoretical knowledge and technical understanding, but also blockchain and DLT's place in society as a distributed trust technology. So it's been an exciting journey, and we're really just getting started.
That's fantastic. And again, when we open it up to the Scrum kind of portion of this, I think the audience will really benefit from understanding just exactly how our blockchain technology and some of the innovation that you're doing with your students is stacking up in terms of what we see in other markets. Last but never least is Alexandra. And Alexandra, you have a very unique position in terms of, you're working for Montreal International, and let's face it, aside from being one of the best places to come and shop, it's also a growing hub for innovation, fintech, AI, gaming, aerospace, like the list goes on. So maybe you can give the audience a little bit of insight into your role, what Montreal International is doing, and what kind of global response you're getting to what's happening in Montreal.
Sure. Thank you, Catherine. So I'm Alex Lagarde. I manage the sales team at Montreal International. So in a nutshell, essentially, we are an economic development agency representing the greater Montreal area. And we attract foreign direct investment. We also attract talent and entrepreneurs into Montreal. We came a long way in Montreal. And during the 1990s, we decided to stop competing with the automotive industry in Ontario and the Midwest and start building our own strength, essentially surrounding high-tech sectors, most notably in life science, artificial intelligence, aerospace, video games. So essentially, we decided to use our key asset, which is talent in Montreal. We have a lot of talent. It's one of the university capital in Canada, and we truly wanted to use that big advantage in Montreal in order to foster investment in numerous sectors, including cybersecurity, where we have a lot of success stories from the past few years. And it's with the Quebec government and also with the support of the federal government that we actually attracted more companies. So last year, we attracted more than $2.6 billion in FDI alone, coming from already existing subsidiaries in high-tech sector, but also greenfield projects. And from these greenfield projects, there's probably around 75% of those projects in high-tech sector. So essentially into artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, gaming, software. So I think it comes from a culture of diversity in Canada, and that's why it's maybe easier to innovate here than anywhere else. We are able to bring foreign talent more easily than others. And what Jamie was saying earlier, I mean, I totally agree with him. When you see what the current administration is doing in the US, when limiting the numbers of H-1B, for example, you take a company like Amazon, they're bringing maybe 6,000 or 7,000 H-1B each year to the US. So for us, it's a big win. It's a big opportunity to bring and to continue to bring foreign talent. We're talking a lot about foreign subsidiaries and foreign companies that we bring to Montreal and to Canada, but there's also foreign researchers that are coming, and they're contributing to the knowledge of Canada as an innovation hub. We think about Joshua Benjo, for example, in artificial intelligence, or most recently, Irina Irsch. It's actually the head of the Canada Center for Excellence on Artificial Intelligence. So you've got all these researchers that have a certain, they're stars in their own domain that we're bringing to Canada. I think it's also a good sales pitch to bring further talent to Canada and Montreal most specifically. So I think that we have a lot of economic fundamentals to continue to attract those companies, and I think that we have most arguments in order to continue to bring more companies and contribute to the innovation nation that we've become over the years.
That's fantastic. So Alex, so last week we held as a group a kind of a prep for this session today, and Mr. Minaya actually kind of, I won't say threw a bomb into the room, but kind of opened up a line of discussion that became very lively. So Alex, I'm going to hand this off to you because I think it was really not only a really interesting discussion, it was a very I think it's a very strong indication of just how passionate we are as Canadians. Sometimes I don't think the international market understands that, but we are. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Catherine. And I'll start by prefacing this by saying, yes, you're right. I did throw a bit of a bomb into the room. And, I'm the type of person who likes to play devil's advocate and likes to create good discussion. So hopefully we'll have an interesting discussion today, specifically around the Canadian innovation identity. And it's interesting when you start thinking about different countries and their innovation identities, because there are certain countries in the world that I would argue have very strong identities. If you look at the US, for instance, a lot of their innovation identity is based around specific regions like Silicon Valley and like Seattle, where they've built honestly some of the biggest companies in the world. If you look at Facebook and Amazon and Google and Apple and Microsoft, I mean, these are probably 5 of the 10 biggest companies in the world, and they've done a fantastic job of just growing these companies and scaling them. And even though these companies are innovating in different ways in different sectors, ultimately they've been very, very successful at scaling very quickly by attracting a huge amount of talent to a relatively small geographic region. Another great example of this is Israel. If you look at the Israelis, they've really, really innovated, especially over the past 5-10 years in cybersecurity. And a lot of that talent is coming from the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and they've created some of the top cybersecurity companies in the world. If you look at Checkpoint Software and CyberArk and Armis, I mean, these are some of the leading cybersecurity companies. Another great example is South Korea. South Korea, I would argue, has kind of 2 main innovation identities, one being around electronics, if you look at Samsung, for instance, but also around the automotive side of things, with companies like Kia and Hyundai becoming 2 of the largest car companies in the world. And so the question I wanted to kind of pose to the group is, what is the Canadian innovation identity? What are the things that Canada is known for, and what are the things that Canada should be known for? And I will just open it up for anyone who wants to comment.
Alex, I have something I want to say. Shocker. So I think, yes, from our dry run, like, some of us got really passionate about this. And I think, like, I love that you raised those particular countries, because I think those countries have a very distinct causal factor to why they are where they are. And I feel like it's geopolitical. Canada has been in a really interesting development of innovation and technology. And I mean, I think we should brand ourselves as proudly as we wish, because I think we certainly deserve that. I think we have an enormous country with a lot of skills. We have a relatively small population for that footprint. We have very few metropolitan areas compared to other countries. So I think, Canada runs on an efficiency that other countries cannot hold a candle to. We really do maximize, what I think, Canada is relatively well known for having, probably a modest, very laid back type lifestyle. And if you look at what we've accomplished with that, and in the ability to maintain updated infrastructure, technological architecture, we've been politically positioned to support that. We're big, but we're small, but we've also, I think, been very aggressive in this sphere. And I think what we think of ourselves is probably very different than how we're viewed externally. I think we've always had a very, I'll use the word modest again, modest view of our skills and what we bring to the table. And I think that we are highly regarded on the global stage for what we have contributed and the promise of what we can contribute, just based on the speed of which we've been developing in the past few years. So I'll be quiet now for a little.
Well, and before we move on, I do want to dig into that last part that you talked about, which is about the modesty, because I think we would all agree here on this panel, and probably most of you listening would agree, that modesty is a key part of the Canadian identity, right? The classic American joke about Canadians is they say sorry way too much, which, by the way, we probably do. I guess the question I want to ask then is, how does that impact our innovation? Do we feel like the modesty side of things is a good thing because we always approach things with humility, we're always willing to learn, and we always get along well with others? Or do you feel like maybe it holds us back in some stages and at some points, because maybe we don't have the killer instincts that some of our Southern friends have, and maybe we don't have that same level of bluster that some others have? What are the thoughts around that?
So Alex, I'm gonna speak in defense of modesty. I mean, I don't know if I'm modest or I'm not modest, but I like to fly a little bit below the radar. I'm not like one of these people that's always tweeting and twittering away all the time. What I see is, modesty allows room for being open to others in their views of the world. So it's not just about I, but it is about an attitude that of respect for others and collaboration. And I think that also is something that is part of the Canadian identity and speaks to our diversity. Now, diversity, we're not only a welcoming nation, but I think what I see in the university is that diversity means that you collaborate across disciplines, and it's across disciplines and at the interface of disciplines that innovative ideas are actually born. So by being modest, we don't drown out others. We allow for the collaboration, which I think is absolutely key to innovation, and in particular, interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary innovation and problem solving, which, when I look at blockchain in particular, there's a lot of conversation about how blockchain is different as an innovation space from more traditional emerging technologies. It's the kind of ecosystem model, a fundamentally collaborative model of innovation, which is actually at odds with, kind of Silicon Valley approach, which is, hold the IP close to your chest, be aggressive, move fast and break things. The blockchain innovation space is emerging as a completely different ethos of innovation. The future is yet to be written, and we're still trying to figure this out. But if that's the future, if ecosystem and collaborative innovation is the future, we have advantages because of our identity that I think others don't have.
And I think when we talk about innovation identity, one of the implicit assumptions there is that we need an innovation identity. And I appreciate the fact that no one called me on that, because, I want to challenge that assumption, right? Which is, do we need an innovation identity to begin with? I mean, I kind of cherry pick 3 countries that have very strong innovation identities. But if I look at a country like, say, Switzerland, for instance, I don't know what their innovation identity is. And by the way, if there are people from Switzerland listening, I apologize, and please do educate me if you do have an identity. But the point I'm trying to make here is most countries in the world probably don't have such an identity. So Alex and Jamie, what are your thoughts around that? Does Canada need an innovation identity?
Jamie, I think you raised your hands first.
Yeah, I want to jump in on there. So I wouldn't use the statement around modesty as much as I would of this kindness and niceness that we have. And I can, this is a real world, because we just signed a significant contract with an organization that I think is going to be the next CyberArk, right, in the identity space, especially for mid-market. An incredible product that's coming out of India, US kind of collaborative. And the reason why we got that contract was because we're nice. And it's funny to say that, but it's really true. Because one of the time, while we're going through the pitch, the conversation was like, hey, listen, Canadians are nice. Atlantic Canadians are the actual nice people in Canada, right? So when everybody comes from Ontario, Quebec, they're like, oh, they're the nicest people ever. So I said, listen, I don't need to train somebody on our sales force or on our customer service on how to be nice, because their parents already did it, right? Like, they came to us nice. And then we're just augmenting that and turning it into customer service and support, and et cetera, right? And I think that element of it, because I think innovation without the capability of executing on the other side of it, from services, from sales, et cetera, like, it doesn't matter what you innovate. You can create the greatest product ever, but if you can't actually get it to market, you just created something really great. And it'll be, a good PhD study, right? But not necessarily a product that you have on the other side, right? So I think we need to be very unapologetic about that wonderful trait that we have, right? And how we can help bring things to market.
Yeah, I agree with Jamie. One of our key assets is really the quality of life in Canada, the cost of living. When you talk with high-tech companies, you're talking to millennials, and there's several projects that we're working on with companies who are setting up shop in Montreal or most globally in Canada, where there's always a work permit involved. One of the founders, one of the team members, he wants to come to Canada. He wants to live in Canada because it's a secure location. We tend to take that for granted because we're seeing it every day, but not every country is like that. And what I think is, and I totally agree with Valerie also. We're a small population, a big country. and we don't really have a military industrial complex to foster more innovation. So historically, we needed to, fend for ourselves and find ways to attract investment, to favor trade, to attract foreign workers, and essentially innovation in Canada comes from that diversity, that ability to bring people from abroad with nationals and to think about new ideas, think about ways to make the technology progress, have new ideas, and I think it's a good it's a good advantage for Canada. Now, the salesperson in me will tell you that when we go abroad and we have those virtual meetings now with foreign investors, some of them are telling us that we're the best kept secret, and for a sales guy, that's the worst thing to say. I don't want to be a best kept secret. I want it all there. So, without being obnoxious about it, I think that we need to maybe brand a little bit more our economic fundamentals, because, investing in Canada, contrary to a lot of other countries and our main competition, it's one of the best countries in the world to invest today. It still is.
And one of the other things, just to kind of tie on to that, one of the other things that I think, in addition to the modesty that a lot of people like about working with Canada, is the relative sense of political neutrality. And this is something that I experienced firsthand as CISO of BlackBerry, because I had to consistently remind people that we were a Canadian company, not an American company. And it's very interesting, especially in the current geopolitical system, how when you start talking about being an American company or being a Russian company or a Chinese company or a European company, you automatically start getting branded with certain things because of the geopolitical side of things. And being a Canadian company, at least at BlackBerry, I felt was actually a big advantage for us because of the fact that we were perceived as being very neutral across these different international boundaries. And the reality is, once you reach a certain size as a company, you need to go international, you need to go multinational. So, do you guys feel like that's another part of kind of the Canadian advantage?
Can I make a comment on that? Firstly, I want to say we had a great comment come in from an audience member saying, I think Canadians are the bridging catalyst in Francophone and English cultural diversity and inclusion. And when those kinds, we're looking globally at inclusion and that dialogue, it's great to hear comments like that. The second thing is, I remember attending a dinner in Ottawa a couple of years ago, and Sir Terry Matthews, who, for those outside of Canada don't know who Terry Matthews is, he's a tech billionaire here in Canada, very successful. And he was very bold and brazen, like he usually is. He speaks his mind, but he said, Canadian businesses, in my opinion, are just as good, if not better, in many realms. He said, but you folks need to do a better job of selling yourself on the global market. Every Canadian business should take a global sales course. The other thing that we've done is we have a fantastic trade commissioner service that has a deep desire for innovation, to sell innovation. We just need to be bridging that gap between what we're doing and what they're doing to have more open lines of communication, which kind of what I would like to parlay into getting some feedback from folks is in terms of public-private partnerships, which is a hot topic right now, especially as we look at the economic recovery. We're going to talk about that in the next panel. We're looking at, the impact on healthcare and during COVID in terms of cyber attacks. But the other thing is we're looking at is in terms of cybersecurity, or innovation as a whole, how well are we as a government and industry collaborating? Because if you look at the open letter to the Prime Minister earlier this week from the Council of Canadian Innovators, and for those folks who don't know who they are, they're a national organization that represent kind of scale up and growth companies here in Canada. And they were very frank in saying, we've done good, but we should be doing great. And we need a champion within government, and we need to bridge that boundary between what the government does and what the industry is doing, which is really calling for what a lot of us have been saying, which is we all need to come to the table with a common vision and work towards it, because it's not just a certain sector within Canada where it's hard for them to get an identity globally, we tend to work, as we are a large company, in a very siloed approach, whether it's cybersecurity or tourism. You know, you have Atlantic provinces who do their own thing. You have Quebec who does their own thing. Ontario always does their own thing. It's very hard to get a national identity globally if we don't have buy-in from all of those sectors from coast to coast. How do you guys feel about that topic?
Well, there's lots of different ways that public-private partnerships can take place. And just a comment on my own experience with it. You know, I'm seeing, of course, in partnering with industries to co-fund the internships that my students are doing in the blockchain graduate pathway. But in my own research, I'm working with Canada's Digital Technology Supercluster as a university professor, and the project that I'm working on is bringing together two small to medium-sized enterprises in Canada to develop. We're co-developing this technology together, and the government of Canada is a co-investor. And so they're taking some of the risk with us, but also providing, you know, connecting us with other industry partners where they can help us scale and develop the technology further, or partners who can become clients of the technology, or fill in some of the technical gaps, and providing really solid advice in terms of strategy and how we move forward to scale this technology. So this is not your grandma's public-private partnership, if you will. It's not, you know, the traditional contractual model. This is really the Canadian government working as a partner in a very entrepreneurial sense with Canadian innovators. So I'm finding it's really, really valuable.
If I may, you know, a good demonstration of you know, what brings us together is some initiatives like the Supercluster initiative. There's one in Montreal called the AI supply chain Supercluster, the Scale AI. And, you know, essentially they're working with local companies, with Montreal-based company, with foreign subsidiaries, and also with other Canadian companies outside of Quebec. Those are the types of initiatives that I think represents very well the fact that we're a big country. It's quite diverse. You have a lot of identities, but at the same time, there are some topics on which we all agree upon. You know, the will to innovate, the will to you know, demonstrate that, you know, you can run a business in Canada, you can be a global player, and you can bring foreign partners to help you do it. So, you know, without that national policy or that national identity, I think that those kinds of initiative contributes to establishing that that identity. I think it represents very well the contradictory nature of Canada, where we're a lot of, you know, provinces, territories, identities, but at the same time, there are some topics on which we all agree upon. I think the Supercluster initiative is one of those examples.
And I want to quickly call out a comment from the audience that I think is right on point. Someone from the audience said, I think the fact that this panel is 50-50 male and female is saying more than anything else about Canada. And I thank you to whoever called that out, because I think that's really cool. And that's something I actually didn't notice myself. But it is very interesting in terms of the way that we approach diversity in Canada. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit, because, you know, one of the big areas of discussion, not just within innovation and technology, but society these days is around fairness and around equality, gender equality, racial equality. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the US and around the world around that. So does anyone want to comment around kind of how do we think about that as Canadian businesses, and to what extent does that play into our success? Is the fact that we at the very least like to think of ourselves as being very inclusive. Obviously, we can always get better, but to what extent is that kind of part of our success?
I can add something on that, having having lived in the US in particular, in the southern states, and obviously I was born here in Canada, you know, I know that not everybody shares this experience, but and I believe there's probably people that think it's for different reasons, but I've never felt as though gender has been a barrier for me. I've always felt that my colleagues, anywhere where I have worked for the most part, academia, that there was very good representation across the board, which makes it very easy, and I'll say at a very practical level, for, just as we're seeing here today, for a female, a woman in tech to speak up and say what she knows about tech without feeling a hesitation or that she may be you know, outsmarted or overruled or you know, underplayed on her knowledge. And I will say, and I certainly respect that not everybody has had, not every woman has had that experience. I have, and I think maybe my comparison to some of the exposure I've had in the US, not that my experiences there were bad, but they were certainly different, in a very different climate. But I love what Alex said just when he brought that comment up, and he said, I didn't notice. And I think that's one of the nice things, is that we don't notice when things are good and equal. And you know, and maybe it should be that way, because for this, you know, maybe this group, this is normal to have 3 women, 3 men, experts in their area, and all respectfully discussing the future of their nation. So I think that says something, and not noticing, I don't know why that makes me feel good, but I love that notion that it wasn't obvious, and that's, I don't want to be obvious. I don't want to be the female in the room. I'm here to do a job and to contribute, right? So that's what we all want at the end of the day, I think, for ourselves and for Canada.
Plus, they put all the women at the top. Isn't that good?
Of course.
So, you know, I agree. I think we are doing really well. I think maybe comparatively, I would like to see us do better. You know, I think we have progress to be made. You know, I'd like to see some more diverse, racially diverse representation in our next Canada Hour, our First Nations people, our Black people, who have an enormous amount to contribute, people of color, and all, you know, ideologies, because we do tend to be more open to, you know, different perspectives. And it's important, you know, as I was saying before, it's important to diversity and, you know, risk management even, you know, because I background in risk management, which is how I got into cybersecurity. You know, you always say if you have a tunnel vision and you're only looking at, you know, what's happening from a single perspective, you are less likely to be able to identify those risks. So it's really important to have those diverse perspectives. And so I think we're doing well. We can do better. And, you know, so that's one thing about us too. You know, we're humble enough, modest enough to say, hey, you know, we're not perfect, but yeah, we can toot our horns though on this one, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, you know, we're a relatively small shop, and we have, you know, South Africa, Barbados, Trinidad, UK, Nigeria, India, like all this in this little shop, right? And I think even more importantly, from very different socioeconomic backgrounds, et cetera, right? Because I think cyber in particular is a human problem as much as it is a technical problem. And humans aren't old white dudes, right? It's a very diverse organization, individuals that we're dealing with. So we need to have all the perspectives to come in and deal with these problems, right? So I think if there, you know, in all fields this is important, but in cyber in particular, because this is a human issue, right? We need to be tied into as many different viewpoints as we possibly can in order to come up with the right solutions, right, for this field.
Perfect. So last question then for everyone on the panel, and very quickly just before we wrap up. So obviously we've talked about kind of the Canadian innovation identity and kind of our strengths, and one of our biggest strengths is modesty. And we've talked about how maybe sometimes we need to be a little bit less modest and try to toot our own horn without kind of giving up that modesty and that humility. What's one other thing that we could be doing better to be bigger players on the international stage and just to be recognized worldwide as the innovation leaders that we are?
I'll start by saying I think we need to do, again, in reference to what we talked about or mentioned earlier, is I think we need to be a little more aggressive in the global market in terms of, if you want to get right down to it, asking for that sale. And I think we have to have that level of confidence and understanding what we're bringing to the global market, whether it's technologies, tools, or people or talent. We are just as good as anyone else out there, and we need to have that confidence going into those global situations.
This year we're probably going to meet our objectives in terms of FDI in Montreal. So it's a good place to shop, as Catherine would say. It's also a good place to invest. And that tells you that there's a massive opportunity today, even with the current pandemic. I mean, there's a lot of companies in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence and high-tech sectors that still are growing today and are still being held by the pandemic today. We see this as an opportunity. So there's a lot of those companies who are looking for investments and they're looking to diverse their activities. They're looking to tap into new talent pool, highly qualified laborers, market access. Now, all those fundamentals, we got them in Canada. And that's why we need to take this opportunity and maximize our visibility. And again, I mean, we've heard it all. I mean, we're North America for beginners, for European companies. We're the best kept secret, et cetera, et cetera. But, bottom line, I think we have a pretty good investment location. There's a lot of opportunity, and more, the pitch that we're doing to companies, we have to do it to people. Because it's also to people that you're talking about, people who might move from where they are to Canada in order to start the team, people who will work here. So I think that there's a good sales pitch for companies, but there's also a good sales pitch for people to come here. As we said earlier, I mean, it's a secure location. It's a great country, nice cities. Its cost of living is cheap when you compare with most American city, with most U.S. cities. So I think that we have a pretty good product to sell, and we shouldn't be shy about it.
Got time for one more comment.
Yeah, we echo about talent, bringing talent to, I'm certainly training people from all over the world, and we're open for business. We're interested in students who are interested in coming and doing their master's and PhD, and they can find, connections to industry partners from not just Canadian industry partners, but partners who are working from all over the world, as Alexandra was mentioning, that are partnering with Canadian companies. So it's that I think we have to make people more aware of the opportunities here to start a new life, get trained, and start a new life, and start a good quality of life. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And, to wrap up, folks, thank you so much for contributing not only your time and expertise, but for giving our, international audience a better flavor of what's going on in Canada in terms of innovation and opportunity. So thank you very much. Stay safe. And hope you guys can stick around for the next session.
Thank you.
Thanks, you.
Guys.
Bye.
Great seeing you all.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Catherine.